This video is audio content only. It does not contain any video footage or images. If you are expecting visual content, please be aware. This is intentionally provided in an audio-only format. We recommend listening to the audio rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding. Welcome. Have you ever felt a profound emotion that the English language simply couldn't capture? Today, we explore the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, a poetic quest to map the hidden corners of the human heart. We'll delve into the linguistic alchemy of John Koenig, uncovering names for the specific, nuanced aches of modern life. From the realization that every stranger lives a life as complex as your own, to the bittersweet fragility of joy. Join us as we give a voice to the background hum of being human and discover that you are never truly alone. Chapter 1. The Quest to Map the Emotional Blind Spot. There is a strange hollowness that sometimes settles into our conversations, a feeling that despite the thousands of words at our disposal, we are still not quite being understood. We have spent centuries cataloging the physical world with obsessive precision. We have specific, distinct names for thousands of different types of finches, for every variety of historical undergarment, and for the most obscure parts of a sailing schooner. Yet when it comes to the internal world, our vocabulary remains surprisingly rudimentary. We are often left to navigate our most complex inner currents with a handful of broad, blunt terms, like happy, sad, or angry. This linguistic gap creates a massive blind spot in the human experience, a series of vast holes in the lexicon that we don't even know we are missing until we find ourselves standing in the middle of one, unable to call for help because we don't have the words to describe where we are. The quest to map this emotional blind spot began not with a team of linguists or a scientific study, but with a single individual in a college library in Minnesota back in 2006. While attempting to write poetry, it became clear that the English language simply didn't have the tools necessary to capture the specific, nuanced aches of modern life. This realization birthed a project that would span over a decade, seeking to shine a light on the fundamental strangeness of being a human being. The goal was to give a voice to the aches, demons, vibes, and urges that hum in the background of everyday life, transforming private, isolated feelings into a shared human condition. One of the most profound realizations of this project is that our language acts as a form of psychological programming. It shapes how we perceive our relationships, our memories, and our very reality. If the limits of our language are the limits of our world, then a limited emotional vocabulary traps us in a smaller, less vibrant reality. By inventing new words, we are essentially building a new linguistic framework that is rooted in our common humanity and our shared vulnerability. This is not just an exercise in creative writing, it is an act of empowerment. It is a reminder that you are not alone, you are not crazy, and your strangest feelings are likely shared by millions of other ordinary human beings trying to make their way through a bizarre set of circumstances. To understand the depth of this mapping project, we have to reconsider the very nature of the word sadness. In our modern context, we often equate sadness with a malfunction in the joy machine, a state of despair or the absence of hope. However, the word originally meant fullness. It comes from the same Latin root that gave us sated and satisfaction. To be sad was to be filled to the brim with some intensity of experience. It was a state of awareness, a way of setting the focus to infinity and taking it all in. The joy and the grief all at once. This project embraces that original definition, viewing these obscure sorrows not as things to be cured, but as exuberant upwellings that remind us how fleeting and mysterious life can be. This project embraces that original definition, viewing these obscure sorrows not as things to be cured, but as exuberant upwellings that remind us how fleeting and mysterious life can be. Consider the feeling of adromania. It is that specific sense that the future is arriving ahead of schedule. We spend our lives looking toward years with fantastical sci-fi names like 2025 or 2030, keeping them safely tucked away in hypothetical cages. Then, suddenly they burst into the arena of the present, furiously bucking the grip of our expectations. You find yourself slipping in the saddle, one hand reaching for the reins while the other waves up high like a school kid who finally knows the answer to a question they weren't ready to be asked. It is the dizzying realization that the future is no longer a destination but the ground beneath your feet. Then there is the frustration of adrenitis, which describes the long, arduous process of getting to know another person. We often spend the first few weeks or months of a relationship chatting in a psychological entryway. Every subsequent conversation feels like entering a different anteroom, each one a little closer to the center of the house. Adrenitis is the wish that you could simply start at the center and work your way out. You long to exchange your deepest, darkest secrets first, easing into casualness only after the foundation is laid, until you have built up enough mystery over the years to finally ask them what they do for a living or where they grew up. Sometimes the blind spot is so large that we don't even know how we feel about our own lives. This is agnosia, a state of not knowing your own emotional condition. It forces you to sift through clues hidden in your own behavior as if you were a stranger or a private investigator. You might notice a sharp, acidic twist in your voice during a routine conversation, or realize you are putting an obscene amount of effort into a trifling task, or feel an inexplicable weight on your shoulders that makes it difficult to even get out of bed. Only by observing these external symptoms do you begin to deduce the shape of the emotion you are actually carrying. There is also a specific kind of fear associated with the act of naming itself, known as amonomia. It is the fear that learning the official name for something, a rare bird, a distant constellation, or an attractive stranger, will somehow ruin it. You worry that the name will transform a lucky, mysterious discovery into a conceptual husk pinned in a glass case. Amonomia reminds us that once a mystery is labeled, it often stops fluttering around our heads and starts occupying a fixed, sterile place in our minds. As we move through life, we often find ourselves gnawing on the same boring flaws and anxieties for years. This weariness is called Altschmerz. It is the soggy, tasteless, and inert feeling of dealing with the same old issues you've had since you were a teenager. You've picked them apart so many times that there is nothing interesting left to think about, nothing left to do but spit them out and wander off to the backyard, ready to dig up some fresher, more exciting pain you might have buried long ago. In moments of quiet, we might slip into embedo, a kind of melancholic trance where we become completely absorbed in vivid sensory details. You might find yourself staring at raindrops skittering down a window, or watching tall trees leaning in a heavy wind, or observing clouds of cream swirling in a cup of coffee. This leads to a dawning awareness of the haunting fragility of life, a mood that feels so profound it seems the only known cure might be the jarring, ridiculous blast of a vuvuzela to wake you from the spell. The mapping of these sorrows even extends to the sounds that haunt our nights, like aminoneurosis. This is the half-forlorn, half-escapist ache of a train whistle calling in the distance at night. It is a sound that suggests both a departure and a staying behind, a reminder of all the places you aren't and the life that is carrying on without you just beyond the horizon. We also struggle with the passage of time and our inability to hold on to it, a feeling called anchorage. It is the desire to keep your grip on a rock in the middle of a rushing river, feeling the weight of the current against your chest while your elders float on downstream. They call back to you over the roar of the rapids, telling you to just let go, but you remain locked in the struggle to keep the present moment from being swept away. In our social lives, we often encounter the anekdote, a conversation in which everyone is talking but nobody is listening. It is like a game of Scrabble where players simply overlay disconnected words, borrowing bits of other people's anecdotes only to increase their own score, until everyone eventually runs out of things to say and the board is left cluttered and meaningless. This quest even takes us into our dreams through the concept of antimatter. These are the dream versions of the things in your life, your anti-school, your anti-friends, your anti-home. They appear totally foreign, and yet you know they are somehow yours. They exist in a parallel world whose gravitational pull raises the emotional stakes of your waking life, increasing the chances that you will end up betting everything you have on a reality that feels just as thin as a dream. When we look at the world at large, we might experience anthrodynia, a state of total exhaustion with how shitty people can be to each other. This exhaustion often causes a countervailing sense of affection for things that are sincere and non-judgmental, things that are just unabashedly joyful or simply exist without the need for conflict. The fear of shallow connections is mapped by apomacrysmenophobia. It is the nagging worry that your relationships are ultimately thin, and that if you were to conduct an emotional audit of your life, you would find only a safety deposit box of low-interest holdings and uninvested windfall profits. It is the fear that you are never really at risk of true joy, sacrifice, or loss, and that your life story is drifting away from you because you haven't put enough on the line. Our perception of others is often distorted by backmasking, the instinctive tendency to see someone as you knew them in their youth. You see an adult with a professional degree, but superimposed over them is a burned-in image of grass-stained knees or a graffitied backpack. It is an illusion formed when someone accidentally opens the door to your emotional darkroom while the memory is still developing, leaving you forever seeing the child within the man. The sadness of our own self-presentation is captured in catoptric tristesse. This is the realization that you will never really know what other people think of you. Although we reflect on each other with the sharpness of a mirror, the true picture of how we are coming off reaches us softened and distorted. It is as if every mirror in the world was preoccupied with twisting around, desperately trying to look itself in the eye instead of showing us who we really are. There are moments of amniotic tranquility, like chrysalism, the feeling of being safe indoors during a thunderstorm. You listen to the waves of rain pattering against the roof like an argument happening upstairs, where the muffled words are unintelligible, but the crackling release of tension is something you understand perfectly. We also find ourselves moved by the simplest interactions, like a contact high five. This is the innocuous touch of someone just doing their job, a barber, a yoga instructor, or a friendly waitress, that you enjoy more than you'd like to admit. It is a connection so simple it feels like it cheapens the power of the written word, making you think that by the year 2025, novelists would be better off just giving people a hug. The mapping of our world also includes the sadness of lacuna, the twinge of regret that there is no frontier left. We imagine the last explorer trudging toward a blank spot on the map, only to remember his daughter's piano recital and turn for home. We wish he had left that continent unexplored, leaving its mists and mountains as a strategic reserve of mystery, so we could still answer our children's questions with a hopeful nobody knows. Our relationship with our past selves is explored through the Daguerreologue, an imaginary interview with an old photo of yourself. You look at that enigmatic figure living in the grainy, color-warped house you grew up in, and you wonder if they spend their day wondering where you are and what you are doing now, like an old grandma whose kids live far away and don't call much anymore. When someone passes away, we might experience dead reckoning, finding ourselves bothered by their death more than we would have expected. It is as if you assumed they would always be part of the landscape, like a lighthouse you pass for years until the night it suddenly goes dark. You can still find your bearings, but you feel all that much more adrift without that familiar landmark to navigate by. Our emotional lives are often like a playlist left on shuffle, leading to a deep cut. This is an emotion you haven't felt in years and might have forgotten entirely until its opening riff tugs on your neurons like a dog on a leash, waiting for you to open the door. We can be jolted by de grace, the unsettled feeling of the vastness of the universe. It is the recognition that the night sky is not just wallpaper, but a deeply foreign ocean whose currents are carrying off all other castaways. We realize that the stars are flinging out scraps of light like messages in a bottle, invitations to a party that actually ended 1,000,000 years ago. There is even a name for the joy of a specific sound, like dialect static. It is the feeling of hearing someone with a thick accent pronounce a certain phrase, the Texan cooler or the Kiwi 30 years ago, and wanting them to repeat it over and over until the vowels congeal into a linguistic taffy you could break apart and give as presents. When we sleep, we might experience dream fever, the intense heat on the skin of a sleeping person. It is the radioactive byproduct of an idle mind humming with secret delusions, which then vaporize when plunged into the cooling bath of reality, preventing a meltdown that could endanger those close by. A sudden glance from someone you like can trigger an ecstatic shock, a surge of energy that starts in your stomach and flashes into a spontaneous smile. It scrambles your ungrounded circuits and tempts you to chase that feeling with a kite and a key, like a modern-day Benjamin Franklin of the heart. The sadness of our place in history is called ellipsism. It is the realization that you will never know how the story of humanity turns out. You dutifully pass on the joke of being alive without ever learning the punchline or the name of the beneficiary of all human struggle. You suspect the final payout will involve something as mundane as how many people it takes to change a light bulb. We also feel ennuyement, the bitter sweetness of having arrived in the future and finally knowing how things turned out, who your sister became, what your friends ended up doing, and exactly when you would lose the people you took for granted. It is priceless intel that you instinctively want to share with your past self, who is still stationed at a forgotten outpost in the past, eagerly awaiting news from the front. This mapping project provides a linguistic framework rooted in shared vulnerability to help us reclaim parts of ourselves. The next chapter explores the engineering of these ineffable meanings.
Chapter 2. The Engineering of Ineffable Meaning. The process of building a new language for the heart is not a simple matter of pulling sounds out of thin air. It is an exercise in linguistic engineering, a form of alchemy that takes the broken fragments of ancient tongues and stitches them together with the vibrant threads of modern life. This project is rooted in an academic foundation established during John Koenig's studies at Macalester College. He does not merely invent words, he constructs them by researching the deep history of how English terms were originally born, ensuring that each neologism feels as though it has always belonged in the lexicon. To understand this alchemy, one must look at how Koenig reclaims the forgotten history of existing words. A primary example of this recovery is his treatment of the word sadness and its Latin root satis. By highlighting these historical roots, the project functions as what critic Ely Williams calls a series of linguistic plugs for the lacuna, the empty spaces of everyday expression. The goal is to ensure that no emotion is left untranslatable simply because we lacked the specific vocabulary to name it.
Koenig's methodology is also deeply concerned with the phonetic and intuitive quality of the words. He seeks sounds that are phonetically pleasing and memorable, aiming for a sense of rightness that makes a word feel intuitive even before the definition is read. This is why he often employs portmanteaus and linguistic blends. For instance, fensiveness combines the Mandarin fancy, fan, with the English defensiveness to describe territoriality over an obsession, while hanker-sore merges a verb for pining with a physical ailment to describe the irritation of attraction. Venbane uses the Middle English wen, describing a congested city, to capture the specific affliction of urban isolation. These blends are not random. They are calculated to resonate with the speaker's existing linguistic instincts. The alchemy of the project extends far beyond the printed page and into the realm of multimedia construction. Koenig recognizes that some emotions require more than just a text-based definition. They require an atmosphere. This is most evident in his YouTube videos, where he uses visual and auditory layers to construct the meaning of a word. To define vemodalen, he utilized a visual collage to demonstrate the weight of repetition. For avant-noir, he used a home movie collage to evoke a specific sense of temporal perspective. This multimedia approach acknowledges that in the 21st century, the meaning of a word is often built through a combination of text, sound, and image.
One of the most successful examples of this linguistic laboratory is Sonder. While its full conceptual weight is explored through the lens of social perspective, its creation is a masterclass in etymological ambiguity. Koenig drew on two possible paths, the French verb sonder, meaning to probe or plumb the depths, and the German Sonder, meaning separate or special. By choosing a word that suggests both deep probing and a sense of separateness, he created a term that felt so necessary it has already begun to bleed out of the dictionary and into the real world. The cultural adoption of these newly minted words proves that there was a desperate need for this expanded vocabulary. Sonder has been appropriated by various companies, becoming the name of a bike brand and a video game, and most notably inspiring the name of Sondermind, a mental health therapy marketplace. In the world of music, the term Sonderlust became the title of an album by indie pop artist Kaoru Ishibashi, while progressive metal bands like Tesseract and pop rock groups like the Rex have used the term for their own projects. A neo-soul group consisting of Brent Faiyaz and producers Atu and Deepat simply named themselves Sonder. This widespread use demonstrates that once a feeling is named, it becomes a tool that others can use to build their own creative expressions.
The project also utilizes specific suffixes to categorize types of emotional experiences. The use of the Greek suffix sclerosis is applied to terms like chirosclerosis. This linguistic precision allows the dictionary to function as a diagnostic tool. By labeling a feeling, Koenig provides a form of psychological control. Cognitive scientists have noted that the act of labeling an emotion can help regulate the physiological response to it. It transforms a vague, overwhelming sensation into a discrete concept that can be managed and discussed. This process of stitching together fragments is often meant to fill holes that have existed in the English language for centuries. English often struggles with the vocabulary of intimacy and internal experience, focusing more on the external world. By using roots taken from Germanic and ancient Greek sources in emulation of existing English terms, the project seeks to make these new words feel like they have always belonged. Whether it is the specific longing to explore beyond the planet or the sense of time accelerating with age, each word is a beautifully crafted exploration of the human condition, offering a new lens through which to view our inner worlds. The linguistic alchemy at play here reminds us that language is always evolving, and it often evolves messily. Some critics have pointed out that these words occasionally misconstrue original roots or mispronounce them, but the project embraces this as part of the natural process of language. Mistakes and creative reinterpretations are how languages grow and adapt to the needs of the people speaking them. If words like serendipity or robot could be invented by authors and eventually become essential parts of our vocabulary, then these obscure sorrows are simply following a well-trodden path. They function as mirrors, helping us see ourselves more clearly by providing a language for the ineffable. Ultimately, this engineering project provides a linguistic framework rooted in shared vulnerability to help us reclaim parts of ourselves. We live our lives under a natural, almost inescapable delusion that we are the protagonists of a grand, unfolding cinematic epic. In our own minds, we are the stars at the center of the universe, the only ones whose thoughts are fully audible, whose motivations are completely transparent, and whose history is truly significant. Everyone else, from our closest friends to the strangers we pass in the grocery store, tends to be cast in supporting roles or as mere background extras. We see our family and friends hanging in our immediate orbit, their lives defined largely by their relationship to us. Further out, we see a network of acquaintances who drift in and out of our awareness like guest stars in a long-running television series. But then there are the others, the vast anonymous crowds that fill the streets, the subways, and the highways. To our egocentric brains, these people often feel like two-dimensional cutouts, blurs of traffic or lighted windows at dusk, existing only to populate the scenery of our own journey.
Breaking this shell of egocentrism requires a profound psychological jolt, a moment of sudden awareness that has been given the name Sonder. Imagine you are standing at a bustling urban intersection. The air is thick with the cacophony of car horns, the rhythmic tapping of footsteps on concrete, and the overlapping chatter of hundreds of people. As you wait for the light to change, your eyes might meet those of a complete stranger across the street. In that brief, fleeting instant, you are struck by a realization that can fundamentally alter your perception of reality. You realize that this person, someone you have never met and likely never will see again, is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. They are the main character of their own story, carrying the accumulated weight of their own ambitions, routines, mistakes, worries, and inherited craziness. This experience of Sonder is more than just a passing thought about the existence of others. It is a viscerally felt awareness that every random passerby is wrapped in a cloud of backstory and inside jokes, connected to thousands of other lives that you will never know exist. While your life moves on to the next scene, theirs flickers in place, continuing invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground. In their epic story, you might appear only once, as an extra sipping coffee in the background of their morning, or as a lighted window they glance at while driving home. This realization challenges the natural human inclination toward egocentrism and forces us to confront the reality that we are not the center of the world. It is a humbling and liberating shift in perspective that serves as a bridge between our individual experiences and the vast tapestry of human existence. Once the shell of egocentrism is cracked, we begin to see the broader social landscape as an ever-shifting labyrinth of interconnected relationships and personas. We like to think we have a clear view of this landscape, but the reality is that we often don't have a clue about the depth of the side conversations and backstories that people keep to themselves. Even our closest friends can be unrecognizable when they are one-on-one with each other, operating on levels of intimacy that we can scarcely begin to fathom. At any given moment, an unexpected pair of your acquaintances might be helping each other through a private crisis, carrying on a silent feud, or having a fling that you won't hear about until years later. We are surrounded by a raw feed of human existence that is mostly hidden from us, leaving us to navigate a world where the most important plot points are often happening just out of sight. This awareness of the hidden depths of others can lead to a specific kind of intensity when we actually make eye contact, a feeling called opia. It is the ambiguous intensity of looking someone directly in the eye, which can feel simultaneously invasive and vulnerable. When you look into someone's eyes, you are catching a glimpse of that vast, complex inner world, and you are aware that they are catching a glimpse of yours. It is a moment where the two protagonists of two different stories briefly acknowledge each other's existence, a high-stakes exchange of social energy that can feel like a sudden breach in the walls we build around our private selves. Even as we recognize the complexity of others, we often struggle with a persistent sense of being out of place within the very crowds we are observing. This is monocopsis, the subtle but persistent feeling of being slightly out of sync with the world around you. You might be at a party where everyone seems to be perfectly integrated into the social flow, talking about their favorite hiking trails or recent adventures, while you are standing there just trying to remember where you left your umbrella. It is the feeling of being a background character who has accidentally wandered into the wrong scene. A reminder that even when we acknowledge the vivid lives of others, we can still feel like outsiders in the shared human experience.
This curiosity about the hidden lives of others often manifests as kenaway, a longing to see how people live in their private spaces. We walk past rows of houses at night, looking at the warm glow of lamps through half-closed curtains, and we feel a deep desire to know the routines and rituals that happen inside. We want to see the unedited version of their lives, the moments of solitude and intimacy that are never presented to the public. It is a wish to peek behind the curtain of the social performance and witness the authentic, messy reality of being human. As we move through the crowd, we might also be struck by ludosios, the feeling that everyone around us is simply improvising their way through life without a clear reason or a fixed script. We see people rushing to meetings, arguing on phones, and navigating complex social rules. And we realize that none of us truly knows what we are doing. We are all just making it up as we go along, playing our parts in a massive, unchoreographed performance. This can lead to a sense of rootwash, the fear that when you eventually look back on your life, it will amount to little more than a series of repetitive routines and meaningless interactions, leaving no significant mark on the world. This fear is often compounded by eise, the understanding of just how small an impact we actually have on the broader society. We realize that the world is a massive system that functions perfectly well without us, and that our individual presence is just a tiny ripple in a vast ocean. We see the pulses of traffic and the commercial bustle of the city, and we feel dwarfed by the impenetrable monoliths of human achievement. In the face of this overwhelming scale, we might experience quibiko, a state of total exhaustion from the senseless tragedies and the constant flow of information about the struggles of others. It is the feeling of being a bystander to a world that is too big and too broken to ever fully comprehend. The complexity of our social world also means that even those we know best remain, in some sense, fundamentally unknowable. This is gnosean, the quiet understanding that your closest friends and family members hold secret inner lives that you will never fully access. They have private memories, hidden talents, and unmentioned dreams that they carry with them every day. No matter how much time you spend with someone or how many secrets you exchange, there will always be a part of them that remains a mystery, a dark forest of the soul that you can never truly enter. We are all managing our own private storehouses of memory, being the only ones to remember certain things and the only ones to forget others. Despite the difficulty of truly knowing others, we often feel a powerful compulsion to connect, even with complete strangers. This can manifest as hail-bound, the instinctive urge to wave to a stranger or offer a friendly greeting to someone you pass on the street. It is a brief attempt to bridge the gap between two separate universes, a small act of social defiance against the isolation of the modern world. We also seek out xeno, which is the smallest measurable unit of human connection. It might be a warm smile from a passerby, a sympathetic nod from someone in a waiting room, or a shared laugh with a stranger about an odd coincidence. These moments are fleeting and random, yet they contain powerful emotional nutrients that can alleviate the symptoms of feeling alone. However, our attempts to share our most profound experiences often hit a wall, a feeling known as exullensis. This is the tendency to give up trying to talk about a significant experience because you realize that others simply cannot relate to it. Whether it is because of simple foreignness or the inability of language to capture the depth of the moment, the experience begins to drift away from the rest of your life story. The memory itself starts to feel out of place, a private artifact that belongs only to you. This is closely related to autolazy, the sadness that there is no way to truly convey a powerful memory to people who weren't there to experience it with you. You find yourself struggling to find the words to explain why a certain sunset or a specific conversation was so life-changing, only to realize that the essence of the moment is untranslatable. Our relationship with the lives of others even extends into the past, through feelings like velachor and anemoia. Velachor is the strange wistfulness we feel in used bookstores, surrounded by the physical remains of thousands of lives. It is the sense of all the people who have owned those books before us, the notes they left in the margins, and the weight of the stories that have been passed from hand to hand. Anemoia takes this a step further, describing a pang of nostalgia for a time you have never actually experienced. You look at old photographs or hear stories from a bygone era, and you feel a deep, inexplicable pull toward a world you never lived in. It is as if your heart remembers a history that your mind never witnessed, a connection to the collective human story that transcends your own individual timeline.
The psychological mechanisms behind these experiences are deeply linked to our capacity for theory of mind, the ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, and emotions to ourselves and others. Sonder is essentially the moment when our theory of mind kicks into overdrive, pushing us to comprehend the true depth and intricacy of another person's inner world. Neurologically, this likely involves the activation of brain regions associated with social cognition and empathy, such as the medial prefrontal cortex and the temporoparietal junction. While the capacity for these experiences varies among individuals, they represent a fundamental aspect of human social perception, challenging our natural egocentrism and fostering a more nuanced understanding of diversity. The cultural impact of these concepts has been significant, resonating with people who have long felt these unnamed emotions but lacked the vocabulary to express them. The cultural adoption of the word Sonder, Sondermind, music groups like Brent Faiyaz/Tesseract, albums, and video games has been extensive. Therapists have even noted that providing a language for these ineffable feelings can help individuals navigate their social interactions and relationships with greater clarity.
By breaking the shell of egocentrism, we open ourselves up to a world that is far more complex and interconnected than we initially perceived. We begin to see that every person we pass is a universe unto themselves, carrying a depth of experience that we can only ever catch a tiny glimpse of. This realization doesn't necessarily make our own lives feel smaller. Instead, it makes the human experience feel infinitely larger. We are all extras in each other's stories, but we are also all protagonists in our own, navigating a labyrinth of relationships where every lighted window at dusk represents a whole world of ambitions, routines, and memories. This shift in perspective allows us to move through the crowd not as isolated individuals, but as part of a vast shared narrative that is constantly being written by billions of different hands. This expanded social awareness also changes how we view the passage of time and the legacy we leave behind. When we recognize that everyone around us is also struggling with the fleeting nature of existence, our own anxieties about time and memory begin to take on a different quality. We see that we are all rowing our boats backward into the future, facing the past while being carried toward an unknown horizon by the currents of life. In this shared predicament, the small units of connection we exchange with others, the ecstatic shock of a glance, or the comfort of a shared laugh, become the landmarks we use to navigate the vast, uncharted waters of the modern soul.
Chapter 4: The Hardening of Joy and the Fullness of Sorrow.
We often treat happiness as the ultimate destination, a golden state of being that we are constantly chasing, yet there is a profound and frustrating fragility to it that few of our standard words can capture. This paradox was perhaps best articulated by an anonymous person who once asked a haunting question. What is the term for consciously being aware that you are happy and therefore becoming unhappy? This specific emotional glitch is known as kairos. It is that precise moment when you look around and realize that you are currently happy, and in your desperate attempt to savor the feeling, you prompt your intellect to identify it, pick it apart, and put it in context. In doing so, the joy begins to dissolve under the weight of its own observation. It is as if the moment dies on the examination table. The etymology of this word draws from the ancient Greek distinction between two types of time. While chronos is the quantitative, ticking clock of the linear world, kairos refers to those sublime, indeterminate moments when something special happens, when the wind shifts, a door is left open between minutes, or the world feels briefly and perfectly aligned. Chiarosclerosis is the hardening of that qualitative moment, transforming a living, breathing experience into little more than an aftertaste or an emotional fossil. Kurt Vonnegut famously suggested that we should notice when we are happy and exclaim, "If this isn't nice, I don't know what is." However, the philosophy of the obscure sorrow suggests that this very act of thinking can sometimes be the thing that kills the vitality of the joy. By the time you have finished the sentence, the kairos has already begun its transition into chronos.
This struggle with happiness stands in stark contrast to the way we perceive sadness. As we have previously explored, the linguistic history of sadness is rooted in the Latin satis, meaning fullness or satiety. Rather than a malfunction or a lack of hope, sadness is an exuberant upwelling that reminds us how fleeting and mysterious life can be. It is a state of awareness that sets the focus to infinity, taking in the grief and the beauty all at once. While we are often told to avoid sadness, there is a vitality in it that happiness lacks. Sadness allows us to dive in, wallow, and examine the world with forceps and calipers, turning our pain into something benign and foreign over time, whereas happiness often feels too delicate to touch. This tension between the desire for experience and the limitations of our existence leads to the sharp awareness of onism. Onism is the frustration of being stuck in just one body, which can only inhabit one place at a time. It is the dizzying realization, often sparked by looking at a map or a departures board at an airport, that you will only ever witness a tiny sliver of the millions of stories and sunsets happening on Earth. You are a bird trapped in a cage made of your own skin, looking out at a vast reservoir of all possible opportunities, a reservoir known as the till. When you are young, the till feels like a massive lake, but as you age, you realize it is more like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Every choice you make, every path you take, necessarily closes off thousands of others. Onism is the mourning of those unlived lives, the realization that you are dutifully passing on the joke of being alive without ever learning the punchline of every other story. Like a father who misses his daughter's piano recital because he is off exploring a frontier that has already been mapped. Our relationship with time is further complicated by xenocene, the sense that time is moving faster as you grow older. It is the feeling that the years are beginning to blur together, losing their individual texture as they accelerate toward an unknown horizon. This acceleration creates a frantic desire to reach out and touch something larger than ourselves, a feeling known as astrophy. It is the longing to explore beyond the confines of Earth, to break free from the gravity of our mundane lives and find a place among the stars where the scale of existence matches the scale of our ambitions. We are haunted by the future tense, the awareness of the version of us that will eventually look back on this moment and see all the mistakes we are currently making. Even when we try to capture the beauty of the world to mitigate this sense of loss, we often run into the frustration of vermodalen. This is the fear that originality is no longer possible, particularly in our age of mass-produced imagery. You might find yourself photographing something truly amazing, a perfect sunset, a waterfall, or the curve of a hip, only to realize that thousands of identical photos already exist. This realization can turn a unique subject into something that feels hollow and cheap, like a piece of furniture you happen to have assembled yourself. You see the same loopy rosettes of milk in lattes and the same inspired image of your sushi dinner repeated in countless digital feeds. Yet the philosophy behind this sorrow suggests a hidden comfort. Just as every photo ever made is being added to the collective story of human vision, our unoriginal snapshots are a way of contributing to a larger picture. We are all collaborators in a massive project to document the human experience. And even if our images look the same, the unique moment in which they were taken remains a memory that cannot be duplicated.
Sometimes, the mundane nature of our comfortable lives creates a primal hunger for something more intense, a feeling called lachicism. It is the desire to be struck by disaster, to watch a thunderstorm roll in and hope it will shake up your life. You might find yourself wishing for a plane crash you could survive, or a fire that would consume your belongings, just to see how you would respond to the chaos. It is a longing for the clarity that comes with catastrophe, a wish to test the limits of your own character when the structures of your daily life are stripped away. This is often balanced by kraxis, the sudden unease of how quickly circumstances can change, the phone call out of the blue that upends your reality. While lachesis is the desire for the storm, kraxis is the trembling realization that the storm is always just one heartbeat away. This hunger for the raw and the real is a testament to how stifling a purely happy or safe life can feel. It is the same impulse that makes us proud of our scars, a feeling known as scabulous. We view our scars as autographs signed to us by a world that was grateful for our willingness to play with her, even when it hurt. They are marks of life struggles, physical proof that we have engaged with reality rather than just observing it from a distance. However, when we actually move toward our dreams, we are often met with the dread of Zielschmerz. This is the fear of finally pursuing a lifelong dream, which requires you to put your true abilities out there to be tested on the open savanna. For years, you might have kept that dream safe inside a terrarium of hopes and delusions that you started in kindergarten. As long as it remained a dream, it was perfect and protected. But the moment you begin to realize it, you lose that protection. You have to confront the possibility that you might not be as talented or as capable as you imagined. Zielschmerz is the pain of the transition from the world as it could be to the world as it is, a jolt of recognition that your expectations might be bucking the grip of your reality. This sense of being out of sync with our own lives can lead to nodus tollens, the feeling that the plot of your life no longer makes sense to you. You look at your choices, your relationships, and your career, and you realize that the narrative you have been following has become incoherent. You are living everything without a rehearsal, an outline without a picture, and you are unsure of the worth of the story you are telling. This is often accompanied by a desire for liberosis, the wish to care less about things and simply let go. You long to stop worrying about the burdens of responsibility and the judgment of others, to find a way to relax into the Kansas of your ordinary life rather than constantly chasing a technicolor Oz that feels increasingly out of reach. You might even find yourself in a state of Tremspringa, the longing to wander off your career track in pursuit of a simple life, tending a small farm, keeping a lighthouse, or becoming a shepherd in the mountains. It is a hypnotic diversion that allows your thoughts to escape their cubicles in the city, even if only for a moment.
The paradox of our existence is that our perception of our own lives is constantly shifting through the lens of klexos. This is the way that memories change meaning over time. A failure from your past might eventually be seen as a shrewd investment. A villain in your story might become relatable, or a golden age might turn out to have been darker than you remembered. We are the sole managers of our particular storehouse of memories, being the only ones to remember certain things and the only ones to forget others. This fluidity of memory means that we are always haunted by the judgment of our future selves, a feeling that creates a perpetual tension in the present. We are all moving through time with the weight of avenir noir, the awareness that the version of us that exists 10 years from now is already looking back at us, judging the choices we haven't even finished making yet. In the midst of these grand existential struggles, there is the heartbreaking simplicity of ordinary things, a feeling called maru mori. It is the realization that the true fabric of our lives is not made of grand epiphanies or major triumphs, but of the mundane details we often overlook. It is the rattle of a fan, the toothbrushes by the sink, the smell of dishes, and the quiet routines of a Tuesday afternoon. We are often so focused on the horizon that we fail to notice the brilliance hiding in plain sight. This is the tragedy of silence, the unnoticed greatness of the world around us, The background music, the architectural details, and the quiet acts of kindness that go unseen because we are too busy or too indifferent to look up. We are limited by oculism, the awareness of how fundamentally narrow our senses are. We catch only a tiny glimpse of reality through the keyhole of our own experience, while our brains intriguingly fill in the blanks with cartoonish extrapolations. We wish we could step back and open the door to the whole of reality, but we are trapped in the amniotic tranquility of our own limited perspective. The awareness of this transience is captured in the word teretris. It is the bittersweet knowledge that all things are perishable, from our relationships and our bodies to entire civilizations. This knowledge infuses our experiences with a desperate intensity, leading to the impulse of morai. Morai is the desire to capture a fleeting experience, to press pause on your life with a camera or a journal. We try to lend credibility to our moments, to prove that we were here and that this happened, even though we know that the moment will eventually get away. The vitality of our emotional life depends on our willingness to engage with these shadow emotions rather than just chasing a fragile, intellectualized happiness. By naming the sorrows that were once obscure, we are creating a linguistic framework that allows us to inhabit our lives more fully. We are acknowledging that no emotion is untranslatable, and that every ache and demon humming in the background of our everyday life is a valid part of the human condition. We are settling the wilderness inside our heads on our own terms, safe in the knowledge that we are all lost in the same vast, beautiful, and terrifying ocean of experience. This shared vulnerability is what allows us to navigate the interior wilderness, moving from the intellectual analysis of our joy to a deeper, more sated awareness of what it means to be alive. If we can find the words to describe the glitches in our happiness and the fullness of our sadness, what other parts of the human map are still waiting to be drawn?
Chapter 5. Navigating the Haunting Landscapes of the Modern Soul. The modern world often feels like a sprawling, half-lit gallery of experiences we are expected to navigate with grace, yet we frequently find ourselves wandering through its corridors with a profound sense of unease. This internal geography is not made of mountains or rivers, but of the psychological states that emerge from our interaction with an increasingly complex and often alienating reality. We are the inhabitants of a landscape haunted by the ghosts of our own expectations, the persistent static of our digital lives, and the strange quiet alienation we feel from our own physical selves. Sometimes this haunting takes a physical form in the world around us, manifesting as kenoipsia. Derived from the Greek words for emptiness and seeing, it is the eerie, forlorn atmosphere of a place that is usually bustling with people, but is now abandoned and quiet. A school hallway at night, a darkened office building on a weekend, or a vacant shopping mall. It is the feeling that the space itself is holding its breath, waiting for the return of the life that once defined it, leaving you to wander through a shell of human activity that feels both familiar and profoundly alien. To navigate these haunting landscapes, we must look at the words that describe the subtle glitches in our consciousness, the moments where the smooth surface of everyday life cracks to reveal a deeper, more unsettling truth. To navigate these haunting landscapes, we must look at the words that describe the subtle glitches in our consciousness, the moments where the smooth surface of everyday life cracks to reveal a deeper, more unsettling truth. One of the most pervasive hauntings of the modern soul is the sense of alienation from the very vessel we inhabit. This is Vayadin, the sudden, jarring realization of the crude machinery of your own body. You might be going about your day, perhaps checking your email or walking to a meeting, when you are suddenly struck by the absurdity of your physical existence. You feel like you are riding a ramshackle parade float that is being run by invisible gremlins toiling away in the darkness of your internal organs. They are pulling strings to move your limbs, kneading your guts, and working the bellows of your lungs, all while trying to further your modern, sophisticated agenda using nothing more advanced than a sack full of bones and splanchnic ganglia zapped by sparks in primordial ooze. It is the realization that your consciousness is a high-tech pilot trapped in an ancient biological submarine, and the two are not always in perfect sync. This mechanical alienation can deepen into indocentia, the unsettling fear that your most profound emotions are nothing more than a chemical cocktail. The word itself serves as a clinical acronym for the primary ingredients of your internal weather: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. It is the suspicion that your love, your grief, and your awe are merely the results of a biological pharmacy dispensing doses to keep the machinery running, stripping the soul of its mystery and reducing your heart to a series of predictable reactions. This alienation often extends to our sense of identity, leading to a state of anastasia. This is the specific anxiety of not knowing the real you. In a world that constantly demands we brand ourselves, curate our social media profiles, and present a consistent persona to the world, we can become haunted by the suspicion that the self we show others is a hollow construction. We look into the mirror and wonder if there is a core identity beneath the layers of performance, or if we are simply a collection of habits and reactions shaped by our environment. This is closely related to typiphus, the feeling that you have become a caricature of yourself. You catch yourself using a certain phrase or reacting in a predictable way, and you feel like you are merely playing a role that you have written for yourself over the years, a flattened version of a human being that lacks the depth and mystery you once felt. We are also haunted by the untested nature of our own character, a feeling known as flictish. It is the nervous awareness that much of your self-image is based on assumptions that have never actually been challenged. You might like to think of yourself as brave or kind or resilient, but you are only ever guessing how you would react to a violent threat, a sudden windfall, a massive responsibility, or being told to do something you knew was wrong. Until the world forces your hand, your identity remains a series of hypothetical sketches. This creates a lingering unease, a suspicion that you are a stranger to yourself, waiting for a crisis to reveal who is actually behind the wheel. This internal haunting is often mirrored in our social landscapes, where we find ourselves struggling to find a meaningful frequency of connection. We might experience the mal de coucou, a state of social exhaustion or emotional malnourishment that occurs even when we are surrounded by people. In the modern era of constant digital chatter and shallow social interactions, we can find ourselves mingling at parties or scrolling through feeds, yet feeling profoundly alone. It is a feeling of being filled with the noise of others without ever being fed by their substance. We are haunted by the lack of depth in our connections, a hunger for an intimacy that seems increasingly difficult to find in the bustling asphalt and neon of our daily lives. This social unease can manifest as paro, the persistent nagging feeling that whatever you say or do is somehow off. You feel like you are fumbling through a series of unspoken rules that everyone else understands effortlessly. You are hyper-aware of your own awkwardness, the way your voice sounds, or the timing of your jokes, leaving you feeling like a foreign object in a social machine that is running perfectly without you. This is often accompanied by emodox, the feeling of being out of sync with the emotional atmosphere of a room. You might be at a celebration where everyone is genuinely happy, yet you feel a quiet, inexplicable sadness. Or you might be in a somber setting while feeling a strange urge to laugh. It is the haunting realization that your internal weather does not always match the climate of the world around you.
Yet, within these social hauntings, there are moments of unexpected camaraderie, like lock-heartedness. This is the specific atmosphere of connection that emerges when a group of people is stuck together by circumstance, trapped in an elevator, waiting out a storm in a terminal, or being the last ones left at a party. In these moments, the usual social barriers drop, and you feel a sudden, intense bond with people who were strangers only minutes before. It is a shared vulnerability that briefly turns the haunting landscape of the city into a small, warm clearing of human connection. The landscapes we navigate are also haunted by the passage of time and the way our goals shift as we move toward them. We often suffer from gray shift, the tendency for future goals and benchmarks to feel huge and vibrant when viewed from a distance, only to fade into banality the moment we actually achieve them. You might work for years to reach a certain professional milestone or personal goal, imagining that it will change everything. But when you finally arrive, it feels mundane, just another Tuesday. The technicolor dream of the future is replaced by the gray reality of the present, leaving you wondering why you spent so much energy chasing something that feels so ordinary.
Our relationship with time is further complicated by déjà vu, the awareness that the moment you are currently living will eventually become a memory. This is not the same as nostalgia. It is a haunting of the present by the future. You are at a dinner with friends or walking through a park, and you are suddenly struck by the realization that this moment is already slipping away, that one day you will look back on this very second with a pang of longing. It turns the present into a ghost, making it feel fragile and precious even as you are still in the middle of it. We are also haunted by the standard blues, the realization that the struggles we once thought were unique to our own lives are actually universal. We find ourselves dealing with the same boring flaws and anxieties that billions of people have faced for centuries, a realization that makes our personal dramas feel like a well-worn script that we are merely the latest actors to perform.
The ghosts of our past are never far behind, often rushing back in a wit. This is the sudden, sharp intrusion of an embarrassing memory from your youth, a social blunder, a failed relationship, or a moment of profound stupidity that catches you off guard in the middle of a routine day. It is a haunting that reminds you of the versions of yourself you have tried to leave behind, but who still live in the basement of your consciousness, ready to rattle their chains whenever you feel too comfortable. This can evolve into a heartworm, the lasting, persistent presence of someone from your past who continues to haunt your thoughts long after they have left your life. They become a permanent resident of your internal landscape, a figure you continue to have hypothetical conversations with, or whose judgment you still fear, even though they are no longer there to see you. Our cognitive landscapes are filled with these internal loops, such as Juska. This is the act of playing out a hypothetical conversation in your head, rehearsing an argument, practicing a confession, or imagining a witty retort you should have used years ago. We spend hours in these mental theaters, haunted by the what-ifs of our social lives, creating a private world that is often more vivid than the one we are actually inhabiting. This mental static often peaks at night in the form of a nighthawk, a recurring restless thought that refuses to quit. It circles your mind like a bird of prey, feeding on your anxieties about the future or your regrets about the past, keeping you awake in the quiet hours when the rest of the world is asleep.
When the mental static becomes too much, we hit the 1202. This is the tipping point where your brain becomes so overwhelmed with tasks and responsibilities that it simply locks up. The name comes from the Apollo 11 computer error code that signaled the system was being asked to do too much at once. In our modern lives, we often find ourselves in this state of functional paralysis, prioritizing every little thing at the top of the list until we are completely immobilized by the guilt of not being able to do it all. This is often followed by prodilectance, the paradoxical urge to avoid doing something that you have actually been looking forward to. You might have a free evening or a planned trip, but the weight of expectation and the effort required to engage with it feels so heavy that you find yourself retreating into the familiar, quiet haunting of your own living room instead. Even our moments of relaxation are haunted by the once, the frustration that you aren't enjoying an experience as much as you should be. You might be on a beautiful vacation or at a high-stakes event, and you find yourself consciously trying to trigger a feeling of joy only to meet with emotional blankness. It is as if your heart has been demagnetized by the surge of your own expectations, leaving you as a bystander to your own life, wondering why you can't feel the things you are supposed to feel. We might try to retrace our sequence of thoughts to find where we lost the thread, an effort known as nimnesia. It is the post-distraction struggle to recall why you are feeling a certain way. Like a child gathering the string of a downed kite, trying to find the source of an anxiety or an excitement that has suddenly vanished into the static. As we look out at the broader world, we are haunted by the mundane absurdity of existence, a feeling called waitai. It is the sudden realization of how strange and arbitrary our social customs and everyday objects actually are. You might find yourself looking at a necktie or a lawnmower or the concept of a mortgage and seeing them as if for the first time, realizing they are absurd constructions that we have all agreed to take seriously. This leads to a sense of dysphoria, the feeling that your life lacks an inherent plot or a clear mission. You look at the vast, complex world, the latigo of human existence, and you feel like a minor character in a story that is too big to have a point. You are haunted by your own irrelevance, a tiny speck in a universe that is simultaneously beautiful and indifferent. This existential haunting often manifests as nihilus, the specific anxiety of realizing how many times you must have barely avoided catastrophe. You think about the car that didn't hit you, the illness you didn't catch, or the chance encounter that changed your life, and you realize how thin the ice of your existence actually is. You are haunted by the unknown unknowns, the infinite number of ways your life could have been overturned in an instant. This awareness of our own fragility is balanced by golagod, the state of being simultaneously entranced and unsettled by the vastness of the cosmos. You look at the stars and feel a deep, vanishingly rare connection to the universe, yet you also feel laughably quaint in the face of such overwhelming scale. The journey through these haunting landscapes is not just about identifying the shadows, but about recognizing the process of our own evolution within them. This is a politus, the moment you realize that you are changing as a person, finally outgrowing your old problems like a reptile shedding its skin. You look back at the landscapes you once inhabited, the anxieties that used to consume you, the relationships that used to define you, and you realize they no longer have the same power over you. You are moving into new territories, carrying with you the names for the sorrows you have navigated. The haunting doesn't stop, but the landscape changes, and you find yourself standing in a new clearing, ready to face the next obscure sorrow with a vocabulary that finally matches the complexity of your soul. The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows is more than a collection of invented words. It is a cartography of the human soul. We have traveled through the realization of Sonder, the bittersweet fullness of sadness, and the haunting glitches of modern life. These terms act as linguistic anchors, proving that our most private aches are actually shared threads in a vast collective tapestry. By naming the ineffable, we transform our emotional blind spots into sites of connection, reclaiming a reality that is as complex and mysterious as we are. If the limits of our language truly define the limits of our world, then every new word is an invitation to inhabit a more vibrant and compassionate existence. As you move forward, may you find the words to describe the beauty and the sorrow of your own unique journey. Thank you for listening.